So Rob, you're an indie author.
Uh-huh.
And I imagine a lot of your audience, our esteemed audience here today, are also indie authors and have been largely relying on digital retail anyways, pre-COVID. So what I want to say to you guys is you, indie authors, and traditionally published authors, you'll be fine too. But indie authors in particular, you have actually an enormous advantage in this after time or sort of the age of COVID, which is that as indie authors, it's very likely that you've not been relying on robust brick and mortar retail distribution anyways to sell your books. Your books haven't been on the front table of Barnes & Noble, and that's why they sell millions and millions of copies. You hustle for every sale you have, and you guys are really good at digital marketing, at understanding Amazon optimization and your categories and your pricing strategies. So for the authors and publishers in that big five landscape for whom a significant chunk of their sales annually or quarterly comes out of that brick and mortar retail distribution space, this is really hard for them. This is not as hard for the indie author. In fact, much like I'm really well equipped to deal with the quarantine, having worked from home, I feel that indie authors are really well equipped to deal with the post-COVID world where you don't have that robust support from brick and mortar retail. Physical bookstore events aren't as much, or book tours aren't generally as much of a thing for the indie author as they are for, the big five traditionally published author. So use your knowledge of the tools that you've already been using to your advantage in this landscape, because you have everything to gain right now from a new digitally focused world.
And traditional authors, check in with your indie authors, see what they can, what tips they can give you to help move things forward.
100%, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Well, I love your enthusiasm for self-published authors. Do you, as a publicist, have a preference, knowing that if you're working with an indie author, they can have a little bit more flexibility with pricing, if they've made some poor decisions so far and they've come to you with a book that has an absolutely dreadful cover, you can say, hey, fix your cover, things like that. So you probably don't have a preference, and if you did, you'd be crazy to tell me. But what are the two different approaches that you'll take with an indie author versus a traditional author? Is the better way to phrase that question?
Yeah, that's a great question. So obviously both have their benefits and drawbacks in more ways than just marketing potentials. So depends on the genre is one of the things that and it also depends on where the author is in sort of the pecking order if they're traditionally published. So something we've noticed at Smith is that in, I would say, the past 5 years, traditionally published authors have begun to recognize, and their agents have begun to recognize, that they need to act more like indie authors, even under the umbrella of a major house. Because unless you are what I sometimes call the golden child, which is, that author who gets the six-figure advance from PRH and a $500,000 marketing budget, and you're the golden child. You're the one that they all decided that season it's you and it's your book. And we all know those books. We've all seen them. Some of them have gotten in trouble recently. American Dirt was a great example of a golden child that got in a lot of hot water. But that was a golden child book where many months in advance, everybody in the industry knew that the publisher was sinking a ton of money into it and was, putting the full extent of their weight behind it. Hello, Mabel. Mabel is the golden child in this household.
Not content to be ignored any longer, she will take her adulation from esteemed audience.
I love it.
So being the golden child, that sounds like putting your content out there and waiting and hoping, and we all want the stars to align and for that miracle to happen for you. But it might not. So assuming that the audience that's listening today is not going to be that golden child, what should they be doing?
Right. So those are the golden children, and so make no sort of false assumptions that you will be one. Again, being a golden child is sort of like winning the Powerball. Like, I don't know why it happens. It's way above my head in terms of how agents and publishers sell books. But for anyone who's a traditionally published author who is not the golden child, because those exist too, right? Like, not every book that the major houses sign are the ones that they decide to put all of these resources into. You need to be industrious and entrepreneurial and sort of treat your book like an indie published author would. Obviously, you're going to have some limitations, like you're not going to be able to set your pricing, independently. You're going to have to be more collaborative on the editing and the cover design. But where marketing and publicity are concerned, there's no reason you can't do pretty much all the same things that an indie author could do, in terms of building your platform, being active in your genre community, being active with your local media and local booksellers. I've worked with many traditionally published authors who are mid-list or debut, and recognize that while they will have the benefit of an in-house publicity and marketing team, that team is spread across many different titles and many different authors and has many competing priorities. And therefore, if they truly want their book to be successful, they're going to need to take a lot of that into their own hands. The self-published author, on the other hand, or the hybrid or the indie published author, tends to get inherently that all of that's going to be their responsibility. So I find that there's sometimes less of a learning curve with indie authors, because they're like, yeah, I know I'm going at it on my own, and I don't have, this sort of machinery behind me that's going to ensure the success of my book. And
which is also true of a lot of the traditional authors. They just don't know it.
But that's exactly what I was trying to get at there, which is that they're more cognizant of the lay of the land, but not always. So in terms of what are the differences of how we would sort of promote or approach those types of projects, the primary difference would be that in the traditionally published case, we would have to be collaborative with the publisher and the in-house team. We'd have to get a really good gauge on, and the author, I often encourage the author as well to ask more questions of your publisher. Like, what are they planning to do? Are they planning to put the ebook on sale at any point? When will the audio edition come out? Are you gonna be able to offer, advanced digital review copies via NetGalley to reviewer communities, or are they doing print arcs only, or are they not going to offer any print arcs? Or there are so many questions at that point that you don't have any control over as a traditionally published author, but you do need to be proactive in asking the questions and learning what you're sort of dealing with.